What's going on, guys? Aco here, and today I'm going to explain one of DBFZ's greatest mysteries: how to play the neutral game. Now, this is a question that I get literally all the time. This is something that people ask for advice on literally all the time, so I've been planning on doing a guide on it for a while. And in this guide, I'm going to break down all the ins and outs of how DBFZ's neutral works, what you should be doing, what kind of things you should avoid, and basically everything you need to know in order to be a much stronger DBFZ player. There's a lot to talk about, so let's not waste any time and jump right on into it. So before we get into how neutral is played in this game, let's just make sure we're all on the same page and clearly define what exactly is neutral. To put it simply, neutral refers to the point in the match where neither player has a clear advantage over the other. As soon as the match starts, both players are at neutral, and the neutral phase does not end until one player gets an advantage over the other. This advantage can be as simple as being forced to block something, or as drastic as actually getting a hit. Either way, whether you get the hit or you force the block, once the match gets here, the focus of the match has shifted from fishing to either being on offense or being forced to defend yourself. It is at this point that the game becomes a back and forth of offense and defense. Usually the neutral phase will not return from this point until either the aggressor decides to back off or the defender is able to escape the aggressor's pressure. There are also a few built-in mechanics in the game that will force you to return back to neutral, such as breaking a Dragon Rush or KOing an opponent. You may often hear players say that certain characters have good neutral and bad neutral. There are many reasons a character can be labeled as having bad neutral, such as not having a reliable ki blast or having limited range special moves. However, that is not to say that good ki blasts and long-reaching special moves are the only things that make good neutral. Buttons or special moves that make it hard for the opponent to advance are also considered very strong neutral tools. As we all know, DBFZ is a highly momentum-driven game, meaning once you are forced into the position of having to block or even getting hit, it can be a while before you can, as they say, get your turn back, which is why the neutral game in this game is so important. That's why we're going to cover the ins and outs of what to do, what not to do, and how to look at neutral in DBFZ. So now that we've established what exactly neutral means in DBFZ, it's time to talk about the elephant in the room, that being the Super Dash. Super Dash is, as most people know, the main and most notorious mechanic of DBFZ. It basically is a part of the entire game, from mix-ups to combos to extensions to conversions to even the neutral game. Basically every aspect of this game revolves around Super Dash in some way, and arguably neutral is affected by it the most. The fact that at any given moment your opponent may decide to Super Dash is the main deciding factor in what options you're going to choose at neutral. Because of this, it can make it difficult sometimes to know when it's a good idea to go on the offensive, or even when you're safe to do your special moves. That's why the first aspect of neutral we're going to cover today is the concept of zones. So what are zones? Zones refer to three different areas of the screen. There is Zone 3, also known as full screen, Zone 2, also known as mid-screen, and then Zone 1, which is basically whenever you are up close. All three of these zones have their strengths, weaknesses, and priorities in terms of what you should be fishing for and what you should look out for. Let's go ahead and start with Zone 1. Zone 1 is basically the most dangerous zone in the game That's why the game starts you out here. It starts you in basically zone 2, because zone 1 is very, very volatile. When you're in zone 1, this is when auto combos become dangerous. This is when fast assists become dangerous. Fast buttons are very dangerous. Lows in general are very dangerous. Basically, almost everything is incredibly dangerous in zone 1. Zone 1 is also where scrambles usually happen. And of course, Super Dash is at its most effective in zone 1. In order to actually 2H a point blank Super Dash at this range, you need to either have insanely good reactions, especially online, or you need to preemptively have put in your 2H, which neither situation is very favorable. So that's why I would recommend when you're in zone 1, instead of going for 2Hs against Super Dash, you want to simply reflect them. Because even from this range, it's still possible to get a reflect out on reaction. It's not too difficult since it's just one quick series of inputs, just back and S. And the best part is, if you're too late or you're too slow, you don't get punished. If you mistime it, all that happens is you block the Super Dash, versus if you tried to 2H it and you get hit, you're now getting comboed, you may be getting corner carried, you might get level 3, you might get snapped. So many bad things can happen, all because you tried to challenge a Super Dash in this situation, when in reality, you could have reflected it and just negated the situation altogether. Zone 2 is a little more lax than Zone 1. In Zone 2, this is where your long-range pokes are going to come into action. Your long-range pokes and your fast assists are still going to be a very strong factor here. This starts to become the range where your buttons are less effective, because most characters do not have buttons that reach this far. But key blasts and long-reaching special moves become very, very powerful here. Super Dash is still very effective here because you are not that far away and the likeliness of it hitting you is still high. But this is definitely a comfortable range where you can start to go for those 2Hs if you have the reactions, because from here they actually do travel. However, I would still, even from here, me personally, I would still recommend the reflect, because when you're in zone 2 like this, as I said, you're looking out for buttons, you're looking out for fast assists, and you're looking out for Super Dash. So rather than having all those things on your plate and thinking, oh, I have to 2H this, it's a lot easier to just commit to the reflect. That way you don't have to think about the Super Dash and you can focus more on those other good options that your opponent still has from this range. And then finally there is zone 3, and this is basically the comfy zone. It is at this range that Super Dash becomes its least effective. Zone 3 is where you have plenty of time to see the Super Dash traveling at you, which gives you plenty of time, even online in most instances, to get that 2H out. Even incredibly fast assists are much more easy to deal with from this range. This is why at high level play, you will often see top players default to zone 3 before creating an opening and then transitioning back into zone 1 safely. Because of the fact that Super Dash actually becomes a liability from this zone, most players prefer to use jumping angled attacks, beams, their key blasts, and long-ranged assists from this zone. If you ever feel like the pace of the match is too fast and you want to slow it down, or if you feel like your opponent is super dashing too much, I would recommend trying to take the match to zone 3, and once you get here, your opponent is going to have to make smart decisions to close the gap rather than resorting to Super Dash, which becomes little to no threat from this angle. So now that we understand zones and the importance of choosing the right decision based on where we are on the screen, let's talk about how to effectively move between zones. So in my opinion, the #1 most crucial movement option is simply the float. In order to float in this game, you press down up to super jump. A super jump makes you jump much higher than a normal jump, but it also gives you the ability to float. So why is floating so important? Well, when you do a regular jump, you have no options after you jump. Even if you double jump, see, I'm falling straight down. See, I have the option of jumping forward for my second jump, But once I've jumped forward, I've made that commitment now, and I have to land in a designated area. However, when you super jump, you have complete control over where you want to land. So even if you do jump forward, you can still move backward at the last minute and throw your opponent off. The extra hang time in the air, coupled with the fact that you can choose basically where you want to land, makes this the best movement option in the entire game. It's no exaggeration to say just about every jump you do should be a super jump. And nowadays that's actually not that hard, because if you just hold the key blast button, which is S, if you just hold S, you turn all jumps into super jumps simply by hitting up. Another huge and important aspect of the super jump and the float together is the amount of distance you can cover. Let's say I want to get out of zone 1. If I do a regular jump, that will take me to zone 2, you know, which is pretty good. And if I double jump, I'm still basically in zone 2. However, with one singular super jump, I can go from zone 1 to zone 3 instantly. And this is even more true if you were to add a dash to it. See, in one jump, I can go from zone 1 all the way to 3 on the other side. So the distance traveled is also a huge aspect of the float. The amount of space you can cover is just too good to not be utilizing. This brings me to another very important option, and that is the momentum jump, which we just kind of covered right there. Momentum jump is anytime you dash and then put a jump after the dash, where a momentum jump carries that momentum and lets you travel across the screen in one go. So whether or not you super jump or regular jump for a momentum jump just depends on the situation. And the importance of the momentum jump is that it allows you to block while moving. So this is one of the best options for approaching an opponent. One of the reasons people like to super dash is because it gets them to where the opponent is very quickly. However, the thing about super dash is that once it's blocked, it creates RPS and you have no control. Not only that, you cannot block, obviously, while super dashing. You are quite vulnerable, especially to assist calls. Momentum jump, on the other hand, gets the same job done, except you are able to block the entire time. Not only can you block the entire time, but your entire kit is open to you as you travel across the screen. So if you momentum jump and your opponent happens to be unsafe, you might actually get a big punish out of that. But on the other hand, if you momentum jump and you see a situation you don't like, you still have the option of backing off. On the subject of backing off, one strong tool in this game is the backdash. There are a lot of situations where backdash is strong. The best thing about the backdash is that it does shrink your hurt box. So if your opponent is close to you and they try to swing a button, the likeliness of you backdashing it without getting hit is high, because if you don't know, when you try to jump backwards, your hurt box gets much larger. This is to prevent people from holding up back out of block strings. This is also why when someone vanishes on you and tries to take their turn, you can backdash out, but you cannot jump out because your hurt box gets much, much larger when you try to jump. So this is something to always keep in mind. But I would say that when you're in zone 1 and even zone 2, I would say try to refrain from backdashing on the ground, because what usually happens is if you're in zone 1 and you want to enter zone 2 to create some space because you feel like a super dash is coming, what may happen from time to time is, I know it happens to me quite often, is the moment you choose to backdash, that's when your opponent chooses to super dash and the recovery of your backdash gets snagged. This happens less often with the air version. The air version is a little bit better about this due to the fact of just how much ground you cover in the air when you backdash. It becomes a little bit harder and there's a lot less lag. on the air version versus the grounded version. However, when you're on the ground, instead of backdashing when you feel like a super dash is coming, I would recommend super jumping backwards, because when you super jump backwards, as we covered, you can end up in zone 3 with just a single jump, and you're taking little to no risk, because as you can see, I'm super jumping as soon as his super dash is starting up and I'm not getting hit, versus if I were to backdash here, I'm guaranteed to get hit. So keep this in mind whenever you want to retreat, or whenever you want to just create some space in general, or get back to zone 3 to gather your thoughts, or to let your assist cooldown come back, or anything like that. Try using a super jump instead of a backdash. Backdash is more for evading buttons. Super jump is better for evading super dashes. So as you can see, there's a lot of benefit in choosing the right movement options in this game. And the stronger your movement gets over time, the less reliant on super dash you will become, and the less of a threat super dash will ultimately become. Now that we understand the importance of movement and which movement options we should prioritize, let's move on to the other huge aspect of this game's neutral, and that is assists. So why are assists so important? The short answer is each assist covers a certain section of the screen, and cutting off sections of the screen is basically what neutral is all about. It's incredibly important to realize right away that assists are for way more than just combos or extending your block strings. They're primarily used for the neutral space. Instead of thinking of your assists as combo openers, think of them more like pokes. We talked before about, depending on where you are on the screen, different pokes become more effective. This is true of assists as well. Just how, like, if you're in zone 1, your medium might be your best poke, whereas in zone 2, you know, your special move may be your best poke, and then in zone 3, your key blast may be your best poke. However, if you have a fast, long-reaching assist, that assist is going to be the best poke in all 3 zones. Basically, as long as the assist reaches full screen, that is your best poke in any zone, because when you call it, you're taking little to no risk, and you have the opportunity to end the neutral phase. If you call any sort of fast assist and move behind it, you have now gotten in safely in a situation where your opponent almost had no chance to hit you. No chance to hit you with a super dash, no chance to hit you with a button, with a straight auto combo, a lot of times with a key blast. Assists are your best pokes. The general mindset should always be 1 assist to get in and 1 assist to extend pressure. If you follow this rule, you're gonna find yourself getting hit at neutral a lot less often. So with movement and awareness in mind, let's assume that your opponent is doing exactly what you're doing. Let's assume that your opponent is keeping an eye out for your ranged assists, and they're jumping over them or they're reflecting them, and basically kind of preventing you from utilizing them. At that point, what is the best option available to you? It's at that point that you will see the importance of layering. Layering, put simply, is combining your assist calls with your character's best pokes. So let's say I have base Goku, who has a very good, very fast key blast, and as you can see here, by poking with my assist first, I basically guarantee that Vegeta has to block it rather than just calling it and hoping for the best. Layering is an area where you can get incredibly creative. You may be surprised just how many of your character's special moves line up well with your assists. When people say that characters have good synergy, this is the kind of stuff they're talking about. So now that we've covered all the things you should be doing and the things you should be focusing on while playing neutral, let's go over a few things that you should not be doing during neutral. The number one thing to avoid when playing neutral is also the hardest thing to avoid, and that is autopilot. You need to pay very close attention to not only what assist your opponent has chosen, but what assist is currently available. For example, if your opponent has a very strong defensive assist, if that assist is up and ready to be called, that needs to affect all of your decision making. Defensive assists have a way of robbing you of turns Even in situations where normally you'd be able to swing, you can easily be counter hit. This is even more true for some of the stronger assists in the game, such as Vegito A, which is both a neutral and a defensive assist. If an assist like this is up, you need to prioritize that over any actions you take, because simply seeing someone close to you and swinging is almost going to guarantee that you're going to be hit by this assist. So a good way to prevent yourself from autopiloting is to always glance up at the opponent's available assists. If they have something like a Vegito A available, try avoiding the assist, and then once it's on cooldown, use your assist to get your turn started. By gauging your actions based on whether or not your opponent's assist is up, it's going to force you to play proper neutral and to make smart decisions rather than ignoring those options and swinging into an opponent's assist, which is most likely going to lead to you losing the initiative. That leads to the next bad habit I'd like to cover, which is a very common one, and that is the act of turn stealing. So what is turn stealing? Turn stealing is any time where you try to force it to be your turn, even though your turn is technically over. Let's say that I spend both of my assists to get in here. I go for a mix-up, but I don't get anything. So at this point, instead of backing off and letting my assist come back and playing the neutral again, I stay on top of them and, you know, overly stagger, and then eventually I vanish or I get counter hit or something. Basically, I stay on top of them until it leads to a scramble or potentially I get hit, when in reality, I could have just reset everything back to neutral and acknowledged the fact that I tried to open up the opponent and I didn't. This is something that you see a lot at high level play, especially if you check out my match reviews, you see it very commonly there, especially among Japanese players. It's very common for Japanese players that if they blow their assist, even if they have the corner, they may try a few staggers, but once they realize, oh, I didn't get anything, they're going to back off, wait for the assist cooldown to come back, and then focus on playing the neutral again. Well, actually, they'll play the neutral until their assists come back, and then they'll use their assist to try to get back in again. Neutral is, by definition, an equal space between the two characters, so there's no reason for you to try to avoid it. So we can't go over bad habits without talking about the super dash. So of course, super dash is, as we've said before, one of the main factors of this game. It's something that everyone deals with and everyone uses, but when should you realistically use super dash? To answer this question, I would say either as a read, as a form of punishment, or in a situation where it is difficult to punish. So an example of a read would be if you feel like your opponent is about to whiff a special move. When you feel like your opponent is about to whiff, that is a good time to super dash, because whiffing will almost always be punished by super dashes. There's definitely going to be times where your opponent will overcommit to a neutral option in order to win the neutral game, usually with beams, and 90% of the time beams are very punishable by super dashes. And of course, situations where it is hard to punish, these are sometimes situations that you create, such as forcing them to block and assist first. Also includes most of the time when you're in zone 1, as we said before, zone 1, you are very close, so a super dash from this range is very hard to 2H. If you feel like your opponent is about to whiff a button or whiff a very unsafe auto combo, it can be a good idea to whiff punish them here with a super dash. Also, if your opponent is in the air, and you are relatively close to them, this is another situation where it is hard for them to stop super dash. As we've shown here, you can definitely jab people out, but it is more difficult, again, to do that when you are close. So if you're in zone 1 and they're in the air, that is a highly likely time where you can use your super dash to bring them out of the air. The moral of the story is, if you feel like you have to super dash, put some thought into it before you do, because there are definitely spots where it is very good, and there are spots where it is very risky. Now, in order to help visualize all the different concepts we've talked about today, let's take a really quick look at a match from EVO 2022. I'm gonna let this short clip play. Let's see if you can spot all the things we talked about just now. So did you notice a lot of the things we talked about? When the match starts, Shanks starts the match by calling his assist, while Pred starts the match by super jumping away to a safe distance. Shanks' assist is an anti-air, so it brings Pred out of the air. Shanks takes the initiative because he sees that his assist has been blocked. Now that his first assist got him an opening, he uses his second assist to go for a mix-up. Pred is able to block his way out of it. Now that Shanks' assist is coming back, he staggers for a bit until he gets that assist, goes for a mix-up attempt, doesn't end up getting anything. Now his assists are locked, so he decides to back off. This is exactly what we were talking about. One assist to get in, one assist to mix, using the right options in the right situations, paying attention to what zone you're in. And then as you can see, Pred now has both his assists up, so he uses a layer. He layers his EX rocket kick with his 21 assist, and Shanks, since he doesn't have any assists up, he's on the defensive, so he decides to super jump over this and float out of the way back to safety, and these two remain at neutral with neither one taking the advantage, but both of them playing extremely well. And with that, we have covered everything that I wanted to say about neutral in DBFZ. While neutral is such a broad topic in this game and there's so much that goes into it, I do think that it is one of the most fun and enjoyable parts of the game. It's where most of the strategy comes from, so I feel like once you get a grip on understanding what you should be doing, the game itself becomes more enjoyable overall. Because at the end of the day, the neutral is what leads to every other aspect of the game. And with that being said, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to leave a like if you feel like you learned something. I'd really appreciate it. It does help out. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next guide. We do guides here all the time. Be sure to check out my guide playlist where I've done guides on many other aspects of the game. Thanks again so much for listening, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.